All right, everyone. Welcome back to another Lunch with a Scientist this Tuesday at 11. Today we have an awesome scientist, Diana Hitchen, who's an aquatic ecologist, who's going to tell us all about the really cool research she does and the great places she gets to go as part of that. Before we get into Diana's talk, I just want to remind you, we have a few things going on around the Headwaters page that you might want to be aware of. Yesterday, Monday, we premiered a really new type of science lesson where you get to study behavioral ecology, like last week's talk with Dr. Gabe Kolbeck, but instead of doing experiments outside on animals that we may not have access to, you can use webcams for animals all over the world to study their animal behavior there. So you can look at that on the Headwaters online learning page. It's also linked on our Facebook page as well. So with that aside, we're going to get into today's talk. Today, like I said before, we have Diana Hitchen, who's an aquatic ecologist, who's done all sorts of ecology with the Great Basin Institute and the Bureau of Land Management. I'm going to turn things over to Diana now, who will share her presentation. If you have any questions for Diana during the talk, please comment them in the comment sections, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end where you can ask Diana all sorts of questions about her path in the sciences, her research, and why she loves doing the type of science she gets to do. So here we have Diana. I will turn my video off for now and let Diana take it away.
All right.
Well, you are good to go.
All right. Like Spencer said, my name is Diana. I'm an aquatic ecologist. And first, we're going to talk about what is aquatic ecology. As you can see here, ecology is the study of how organisms interact with each other in their environment. And aquatic just means in the water. So the ecosystems that I work in are in water. Okay, so I would like you guys to all look at that salamander over there and answer what he's asking you to do. So write the name of an aquatic ecosystem near you. You might know the specific name, like Spencer said, the Truckee River is near his house, or you might not know the name. So you could just say the ocean or the bay. Any place with water is an aquatic ecosystem. So I want you guys to think about that while I'm telling you about the ecosystems that I work in and relate it to the ones that are near you. So an ecosystem is a dynamically interacting system of living organisms and the non-living components of the environment. Like in this one right here, we have the stream. There are living plants, but there are also non-living rocks, and they interact in unique ways. What I do for work primarily is collect data. So here we have a couple photos. One is of me measuring some rocks, and one is of my coworker Audrey down in the river there collecting bugs with a bug net. And we collect a lot of different parameters. A parameter is a measurable factor, such as the water quality, temperature, macroinvertebrates, which is just a fancy word for bugs. That's what Audrey is collecting in the photo, and all kinds of other parameters. And you might ask, why so many things? Why are we collecting so much data? And the reason is that we need many points of data to get a full picture of the stream. The more information we have, the better, always. And that's a really important principle in science, is to collect as much data as possible, and it will help you create a more full picture. We also follow a protocol, which is a systematic, repeatable method. It's another thing that's super important in data collection, is that we collect the data the same way each time so that we can get comparable results. And that is our process of data collection. So my project that I work on in the summers is related. The goal is to protect habitat for the Lahontan cutthroat trout. That's that fish you can see there in the photo. And we'll get into later why it's important to protect habitat for that fish. We'll get there. So this is a cross section of a stream. It's as if we slice the stream through the middle and we're looking down the stream. I wanted to show you guys this because it shows some really important principles of hydrology. Hydrology is the study of water. It's related to aquatic ecology, and we use both to get a big picture of the stream. So when we look at this stream through here, we consider the water at different stages. We've got this low one here. Then as the water gets higher, we call it the bankful elevation. Then as it gets even higher, we call it the floodplain. And then here they also explain the topographic floodplain. So we're imagining that water when it's low and then when it's increasing. Perhaps like right now in the springtime, our streams are the highest they'll be because the water is flowing more in the springtime. So we look at these different stages and we can model the velocity and the quantity of water that's passing through the system, which is really important to know how much water is going through the stream because we will use that water down the line. And I'll talk about that later also. So these photos here show a day in the life of an aquatic ecologist. This first photo is the work site, which is similar to the office. And then the second photo is the campsite, which is home after you're done working. So something that's really unique about this type of work is that you don't go to an office every day. Environmental science is really great for people who like to be outside, but it also has its pros and cons. It is hard to camp every single night during the week without a warm bed or without cell service. And so, for example, this location here where the tent is, it's very beautiful, beautiful sunset. And this location is 1 hour from any road, any paved road, and it's about 4 hours from any city. So it's very remote. This type of work is not right for everybody, but some people really like it and I really enjoy it. The purpose of this research, why are we doing it? Why do we take all these small measurements in a stream? Why do we care? So monitoring the health of a stream, we can tell whether it is improving or degrading, whether it's getting better or worse. And we do this to measure the impact of our human development on the ecosystem. So there are a lot of things that we humans do that affects our environment. We have some examples here. They're infrastructure. That is a culvert. It's like a tunnel where the water passes through underneath the road. Things happen like fires. We do logging and we do cattle grazing on land. And those are just some examples of the things that we do around these ecosystems that might change the ecosystem. We also have human influence in a positive way, which is when we do restoration on a stream. So for example, this stream in the photo used to be a mining site where they were mining rocks to sell, like minerals. And the stream got very messed up. And so they did a restoration project. And you can see right in the middle, there's a very straight line of rocks. So the people that did the restoration placed those rocks in a specific place so that the water would flow properly to bring it back to its natural state. And it can never be exactly the same as it was, but now this functions as a healthy stream. What we find often in these types of ecosystems that have human influence is we find invasive plant species, poor water quality, fine sediment, and not very good fish habitat. But sometimes we don't find those things, so we need to measure it so that we know. We can't make any assumptions about what it'll be like. We have to use the data to be sure that it is the way that we think it is. And so we quantify, that is, we figure out how much things are. That's a really good vocabulary word to know. Often we're surprised by the results because each ecosystem is different. So just like individual people, they respond differently to the same things. So in one location, there might be cattle grazing and the stream might get degraded and get very unhealthy. And in another location, it might be perfectly healthy, even with the cows. So that's why we take this data so that we can balance the environmental health with the human activities, because those human activities are also important to our lives. We don't want to stop existing, humans, so we need to find the balance where the stream can be healthy and also humans can do the activities that they need to do. So overall, we monitor the health of rivers and streams to see how the way that we use land impacts them. It's really important for humans. Water is an important resource. We need clean and abundant water supplies for drinking, agriculture, habitat for fish, animals, plants, also for recreation, industry, and power. So these are a lot of things that make our world work. If you didn't have drinking water in your tap, if you didn't have power to turn on your lights, and if you didn't have a place to go recreate on the weekends and be outside where there was beautiful water, life would be not as good. So water is a very important resource for human life. And we need both clean water, for example, to drink, but we also need a quantity of water. We need sufficient water to do things like agriculture. If you don't use enough water, the plants won't grow. So we need to focus on both of those things. My project specifically has the goal to protect habitat for an endangered native fish, which is the Lahontan cutthroat trout. And habitat is another vocabulary word for you guys that I imagine most of you know. But habitat is the place where an animal can live. So for example, this Lahontan cutthroat trout needs a specific habitat to be healthy. It can't live in the dry Sahara Desert. A fish would die. You guys probably know that. So every animal has a place that it goes best. And so we need to keep that place to have the conditions that it needs so that the animal can be healthy. Another good example, you can think of yourself, we need certain conditions to live. So in our houses, we have a thermostat where we keep it between, for example, 60 degrees and 70 degrees is where we feel comfortable. And we can go into hotter temperatures and colder temperatures, but we only have a certain window. So maybe once it gets over 100 degrees, we start to get really uncomfortable. And it's same for animals. So a fish like the Lahontan cutthroat trout, if the water gets too warm, the fish feels like it's suffocating the same way we would on a really hot day outside. So that's its habitat. It's the range that the animal can live in the conditions where it can feel comfortable and survive and thrive. The reason that a fish like this Lahontan cutthroat trout is important is not only because we care about the fish because we care about animals, but it has greater impacts. So you guys may have learned about a food web or something like that in science. And an ecosystem is similar, that it's like a web. So we have, say, our fish and our plants and the salamander, all these different parts of the ecosystem together. And if one part gets messed up, like we lose the fish, then everything else falls apart because they're all connected. So in the food web, say the fish, the Lahontan cutthroat trout, has a predator and prey. It has something that it eats and something that eats it. And if it goes away, then that messes up then there's nothing for what eats it to eat. And so the whole ecosystem will change drastically if we lose any species. And that's just the main reason, one of the reasons why maintaining species is really important. And finally, in our future research, if we see a trend in the data, like the stream health is improving or degrading, we can research what in the surrounding environment may be causing that change and then address the problem. I really love doing science, but it's also important to me that my work is being used to make the environment better, not just written in a research paper for other scientists to read. Research is also extremely important in the world of science, but I really enjoy seeing my work influence changes in the public lands that I care about. And that's something that's really cool about doing this type of work, is there are real implications for decision-making and policy in the areas that you work. And that is all.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana. That's great. So in a moment, we'll move into our Q&A. If you would just stop screen sharing there in the bottom of in your Zoom meeting. So at this point, if any of you watching on at home have any questions and you would like to ask them of Diana about aquatic ecology or any parts of her research, you can do so in the comments. And I'm gonna get us going here. Diana, you talked a little bit about how maybe the Lahontan cutthroat trout don't like really warm water. Could you describe any other characteristics of what might be a healthy aquatic ecosystem that might be good for these trout or other fish?
Yes. So trout in particular like cold, clear water. And so they have a very small window of temperature that they can live in. I was explaining to you guys about how when it gets above about 100 degrees is when I start to feel really uncomfortable. So our window as humans is very big. We can go from 100 degrees to freezing and, put on a jacket or turn on the fan and we feel okay. But a fish's window is really small. So these fish like really cold water, and it also has to be clear. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen a river that is brown or murky. These fish really don't like that type of water. It's got to be clear and free of any toxins because they can absorb that straight through their skin. And one more thing about that is they really like shade and pools. So these fish need shady locations where they can hide during the day when it's warm to stay cool. And so that's why it's really important to have plants on the side of a river and things like dead trees, rocks, covering and making these little locations for fish to hide during the day, because a lot of animals hide underground or in the shade during the day because they have so much smaller of a window that they can survive in temperature.
Oh, that's neat. And so our next question is, how did you first get involved in aquatic ecology or this type of science?
I started doing hydrology when, it was my first job, only outside of college, so I had never really done it when I was in school. And that's something that you might be surprised to hear, that in school I had more of a general education. And then when I went out to start working, I decided that I wanted to work in water because I just had always loved water. So I started doing it up at Lake Tahoe and just really enjoyed being in the water. And I had my first job there working in streams that flow into Lake Tahoe.
Oh, that's great. Our next question is, what is your favorite type of aquatic ecosystem?
I really like streams and rivers. I really like small rivers, such as that one, a couple of them that I showed you guys in a photo. Just a really small stream that is up high in the mountains, and it has that really cold, clear water. And I just think they're really beautiful, and they're really interesting because there's not a lot living in them. For example, a big lake, kind of a swampy lake, might have a lot of species in it. It could be very rich with species, which would be interesting. You can imagine like a swamp in Florida that has alligators and all kinds of birds, just very rich with wildlife. But the streams that I work in are typically smaller and they don't have as much life in them. And so it's cool that you can see the water is very clear and you can see all the life that's in them. It doesn't look like there's much from the outside, but then say, for example, you flip over a rock and underneath there are all these bugs moving. So there is life in them, it's just smaller.
Cool. I have a question coming in from one of our audience members about the Lahontan cutthroat trout. And what types of predators are there for the Lahontan cutthroat trout? We talked a little bit about that they were eaten, but what could eat them?
So one of the things that eats these fish is actually a similar species that is larger. For example, there is a trout called the lake trout, and the Lahontan cutthroat trout is the native fish. So let's say, for example, the Lahontan cutthroat trout could be about this big, and the lake trout, which is very similar, looks very similar in physiology, but it could be about this big. And so because it's bigger, it's more competitive in the environment, and it will be more successful, and it actually can eat the other trout.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yes, and those ones are non-native. They came here and they will eat the native ones because they're bigger.
Cool. So our next question is, we have a bunch of people watching around from at home who might be interested in doing their own aquatic ecology or studying a stream or waterway near their house, but maybe they don't have a ton of scientific equipment like a thermometer or a staff gauge or something like that. What could be something that they could do just with their eyes or hands that might allow them to investigate a waterway near them and learn more about it and how it may or may not be healthy?
I have a couple of ideas for that. I used to teach stream science with kids before, and we use all kinds of tools that you might have at home. So one thing that I would like to do is you can take a jar, any clean jar or cup with a lid, like a peanut butter jar, and you can scoop up some water and some sediment from the bottom of the stream. That's like the rocks and soil that are in the bottom.
Yeah.
And what you'll do is shake it up and then put it down and let the sediment settle to the bottom. And that way you can tell a lot about that stream based on if it has big rocks, they will settle down quickly and the water will get clear. But if you have different types of rocks, the water might stay murky. So you could time how long it takes for the water to get clear enough that you can look through it. And you can learn a lot about the sediment there.
And would water getting more clear faster or more clear longer, which one would be more healthy?
I think that's up for them to figure out.
I love it. So now we've got.
I don't want to give it away.
Great.
The one other thing I would recommend to do if you go to a stream or a lake or river or anything is always pick up a rock, turn it upside down, and look and see the bugs that are on the bottom of a rock. They're really cool.
Cool. That's great. You could even count how many bugs are under that rock and compare. That's great. So our next question, Diana, is so someone who grew up in New England was always told to watch out for leeches. And we wanted to know, are there leeches around the Tahoe Basin area? Is that something that we might want to think about, and why?
Not in this location. There are not leeches, but I believe that there are in New England, where you said there are not any to worry about here.
Okay, cool. That's great. And then the last type of thing that we have is if you were going to go out and measure something in a stream that wasn't living, what's a great example of something that someone could maybe measure in a stream that's not alive at home to try to understand or study a river near them?
One thing that's really cool that you can measure is the flow rate of the water. And the way that we measure that as scientists is with lots of crazy tools and equipment. But there is a way that you can do it without that, which is you can pick a leaf or a stick, something light, and toss it on the surface of the water and watch it flow down. And you can use a timer, stopwatch, or something on your cell phone, and you can time how long does it take this leaf to travel from this point in the river to this point. And you can take that time and maybe remember how before I mentioned it's really good in science to get as much data as possible. So I wouldn't just take that measurement once. I would take it at least 10 times and average them out and see then how fast the water is going down the stream.
And maybe that number could change depending on the day or week or season that you collected that. That sounds like a really fun experiment. I might have to go try that behind my house later today.
And in fact, just one fun fact is that real hydrologists, when the water is too fast and it's not safe for them to go down the water, like in a flood, they will take oranges, like the orange that you eat, and throw it into the water and watch the orange bob down and use that as a rough measurement.
Wow, good to know. Food and science merging together as one. That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Diana. So I think that's all the questions we have for today. If any of you missed this broadcast or know someone who would be interested in watching it again, we will repost this on our website and our Facebook page, so you can look at that after the fact. But thank you so much, Diana, for telling us all about aquatic ecology. We appreciate you taking your time out of your day to do that. And that's all we have for today. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, guys.